My wife said, "Give me full access to your $2.8 million inheritance, or this marriage is over." I asked, "Okay, why now?" Put down my fork, called her bluff, and calmly reached for my lawyer's number as she panicked. Days later, she returned to my door, desperate for, "I'm Evander, 36M, investment advisor in Charleston, and 2 weeks ago my wife of 2 years gave me an ultimatum that she probably wishes she could take back." Some background. I inherited $2.8 million from my grandfather's textile fortune when I was 28. Good money in Charleston, not crazy wealthy, but enough to live comfortably and never worry about bills. I work as an investment advisor mostly because I enjoy it, and it keeps me connected to the financial world. My wife Celestia, 32F, is a luxury real estate agent here in Charleston. We met at a charity gala, dated for 8 months, got married in a beautiful ceremony at Magnolia Plantation. She's smart, ambitious, knows the high-end market inside and out. But lately, she's been getting increasingly frustrated about what she calls our financial arrangement. The inheritance sits in an irrevocable trust my grandfather set up before he died. Smart man. He'd watched his own father lose a chunk of the family fortune to a gold-digging second wife back in the 50s, and he wasn't about to let that happen again. The trust pays me a comfortable annual distribution, covers major expenses, but the principal is completely protected. When Celestia and I got engaged, I explained the trust structure to her, made it clear that while we'd live well off the distributions, the inheritance itself was locked down tight. She seemed fine with it at the time, said she appreciated that I was responsible with family money. That changed about 6 months ago. Started with little comments about how we could do so much more if I had direct access to the principal. Maybe buy a bigger house, invest in her real estate business, travel more extensively. I explained that wasn't how trusts work, but she kept pushing. "Other wives have access to their husband's family money," she'd say. "It's called being partners. Other husbands don't have their money in irrevocable trusts," I'd reply. Last month, she started getting more aggressive about it. Brought up examples of wealthy couples she knew through work where the wife had equal access to everything. Said it was insulting that I didn't trust her with our money. I pointed out that it wasn't about trust. The legal structure existed for protection, and changing it wasn't even possible without dissolving the entire trust, which would trigger massive tax consequences. "So change it," she said. "It's your inheritance. You should be able to access your own money however you want." That's when I realized she fundamentally misunderstood how irrevocable trusts work. Once they're established, that's it. The assets belong to the trust, not to me personally. I can't just decide to restructure it because my wife wants access. 2 weeks ago, she escalated to an ultimatum. We were having dinner at Husk, nice place downtown, the kind of restaurant the trust distribution easily covers. She'd been unusually quiet all evening, and I could tell something was building. "I've been thinking about our marriage," she said over dessert. "Okay. I need you to find a way to give me access to your inheritance. Full access, as your wife and partner." "Celestia, we've discussed this. The trust structure doesn't allow for that." "Then find a lawyer who can change it. I'm not asking for everything, just equal partnership in our financial decisions." I set down my fork and looked at her across the table. "And if I can't or won't do that, then I don't think this marriage is working." The restaurant noise faded out. My wife of 2 years, sitting across from me in a dress I'd bought her, telling me she was ready to end our marriage if I couldn't give her access to money that legally wasn't even mine to give. "Let me make sure I understand," I said calmly. "You're saying you want a divorce unless I can restructure an irrevocable trust to give you access to my family's inheritance. I'm saying I need a partner who treats me like an equal, not someone you keep locked out of major financial decisions. And you're willing to end our marriage over this? If that's what it takes." I nodded slowly, pulled out my phone, and opened my contacts. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Calling my lawyer," I said. "If you want a divorce, let's do this properly." Her face went white. "Evander, I didn't mean right now. I meant we should work together to figure this out." "No, you were pretty clear. Access to the inheritance or divorce. Since I can't give you access to the inheritance, divorce it is." I hit call and put the phone to my ear. "Soren, it's Evander. I need to discuss divorce proceedings. Yes, tonight if possible. Celestia spent the rest of dinner trying to backtrack, saying she'd been emotional, that we could work things out. But something had crystallized for me in that moment. She hadn't married me, she'd married my inheritance, and when she couldn't access it, she was ready to walk away. The conversation with my attorney Soren Pike was enlightening. Turns out my grandfather's trust structure was even more bulletproof than I'd realized. Not only was the inheritance completely protected from any divorce settlement, but the trust had specific provisions preventing distributions for legal settlements or spousal claims. Your grandfather really thought this through, Soren said. The trust was established years before you met your wife. The inheritance was never marital property, and South Carolina law is very clear about separately held assets in irrevocable trusts. So she has no claim to any of it? None whatsoever. She could hire the best divorce attorney in the state, and the result would be the same. When I told Celestia this, her response was illuminating. That's not fair, she said. I'm your wife. I've supported your career, built a life with you. Doesn't that entitle me to some security? You're entitled to whatever marital assets we've built together, I said. But my inheritance was never marital property. We'll see about that, she said. Famous last words. Edit. For those asking why I didn't try to work things out, when someone gives you an ultimatum about money, especially inherited money, they're showing you exactly what they value in the relationship. Update 1. Celestia did exactly what she said she'd do. Hired Riven Cade, one of the top divorce attorneys in Charleston, and asked him to challenge the trust structure. Their consultation didn't go the way she expected. I know this because Riven called Soren directly after meeting with her. Professional courtesy between attorneys, apparently, when one lawyer realizes the opposing party doesn't have a case. Your client's wife was in my office for 2 hours today, Riven told Soren. I've reviewed the trust documents you sent over. This is the most airtight inheritance protection I've seen in 20 years. My client's grandfather had excellent legal advice. Indeed he did. I had to explain to Mrs. Quinn that she has zero legal claim to any trust assets. The trust was established 8 years before the marriage. All assets were inherited property, and South Carolina doesn't recognize spousal claims against irrevocable trusts. What was her response? She asked if there were any loopholes. I told her the only way to access trust principal would be if her husband voluntarily dissolved the trust, which would trigger capital gains taxes on the entire $2.8 million, which he won't do. Which would be financial suicide even if he wanted to. I'm withdrawing from representation. Soren shared this conversation with me, and I have to admit, I felt a certain satisfaction. Not spite, exactly, but vindication. My grandfather had set up this structure specifically to protect family wealth from exactly this kind of situation. When Celestia came home that evening, she was furious. Your lawyer somehow convinced my lawyer that I don't have any rights to your money, she said. My lawyer didn't convince anyone of anything. He just showed yours the legal documents that prove what I've been telling you for months. This is ridiculous. I'm your wife. Yes, and you're entitled to half of everything we've earned and acquired during our marriage. But you're not entitled to money I inherited before I met you. Other states have different laws. We live in South Carolina. We got married in South Carolina. South Carolina law applies. She spent the next hour calling other attorneys. Same story from all of them. When you inherit money through an irrevocable trust established before marriage, that money is completely protected from spousal claims. This can't be legal, she kept saying. But it absolutely was. My grandfather had specifically designed the trust to survive exactly this scenario. He'd seen what happened when wealthy families didn't protect their assets, and he'd made sure our family wouldn't face the same vulnerability. That night, Celestia asked me directly, if you dissolved the trust and took the tax hit, would you do it to save our marriage? No, I said without hesitation. Why not? Because someone who would end a marriage over money they never had a right to isn't someone I want to stay married to. That's when she started crying, big dramatic tears about how I didn't love her, how I was choosing money over our relationship, how she felt like she'd married someone who didn't trust her. I trusted you enough to marry you, I said, but I'm not going to bankrupt my family's legacy because you decided 2 years later that you're entitled to it. She moved into the guest room that night. Started making calls to divorce attorneys in other states, hoping to find someone who'd tell her what she wanted to hear. They all told her the same thing. Edit. Several people asked if I felt bad about the situation. I felt bad that my wife turned out to be someone who'd threatened divorce over money, but I felt great about being protected from financial manipulation. Update 2. The divorce proceedings were educational in ways I hadn't expected. During discovery, we had to provide financial records for the past 5 years. That's when some interesting patterns became clear. Celestia's spending had increased dramatically after our wedding. Designer clothes, expensive spa treatments, luxury vacations that she'd charged to credit cards expecting me to pay off. Her real estate income was actually pretty modest. Most of her lifestyle was being funded by what she thought was temporary access to my money, until she could get permanent access to the inheritance. The most telling evidence was her Google search history, which her attorney had to provide as part of asset discovery. Searches for how to access husband's trust fund, spousal rights to inherited money, breaking irrevocable trusts, and my personal favorite, South Carolina inheritance laws spousal claims. She'd been researching how to access my inheritance since about 3 months after our wedding. Judge Thalia Knox reviewed all the evidence with barely contained amusement. When Riven presented Celestia's case for spousal access to the trust, Judge Knox interrupted him. "Counselor, are you seriously arguing that your client has a claim to assets held in an irrevocable trust established 8 years before her marriage?" "Your Honor, we believe the marriage creates a partnership that should include..." "Counselor, I've been presiding over family court for 15 years. I've never seen a more clearly protected inheritance. The trust documents are pristine, the timeline is unambiguous, and South Carolina law is crystal clear on this matter." Riven tried a different approach. "Your Honor, perhaps we could argue that the trust distributions during marriage constitute marital income, which your client is entitled to claim against for purposes of spousal support calculation, but not access to trust principal. Is there any other matter to discuss?" That's when Riven did something I've never seen in a courtroom. He turned to Celestia and said, "Ma'am, I strongly recommend you accept whatever settlement your husband's attorney offers, because this case is unwinnable." The settlement was simple. Celestia got half of our marital assets, which amounted to about $40,000 in home equity and $15,000 in joint savings. No alimony because she had earning capacity, and the marriage was short-term. No claim to any trust assets. Her legal fees were $85,000. My legal fees were covered by a provision in the trust for defending against inheritance claims. After the settlement was finalized, Celestia's attorney shook Soren's hand and said, "That's the most thorough asset protection I've ever seen. Who drafted the original trust?" "Judge Morrison Pike," Soren replied. "My father. He believed in protecting family wealth from family predators." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Edit. Someone asked if Celestia seemed to understand what had happened. I think she understood she'd gambled and lost, but I'm not sure she understood that the game was rigged against her from day one. Final update. It's been 6 months since the divorce was finalized, and I wanted to give you guys a final update on how everything turned out. Celestia's life took a sharp downturn after our divorce. Word spread quickly through Charleston's luxury real estate community about the circumstances of our split. Turns out, wealthy clients don't love working with agents who've publicly tried to access their ex-husband's inheritance. Her business dried up almost immediately. She moved to Atlanta about 3 months ago, presumably to start over where people don't know the story. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she's working for a corporate real estate firm now. Standard residential sales rather than luxury properties. Meanwhile, the trust continues to perform exactly as my grandfather intended. The distribution covered my legal expenses, maintains my lifestyle, and the principal keeps growing through conservative investments. I've actually increased my involvement in the trust management, working with Soren to ensure it stays protected for future generations. My dating life has been interesting. Word gets around in Charleston social circles, and apparently I'm now known as the guy who protected his inheritance. This has attracted 2 very different types of women: those who are impressed by financial responsibility, and those who see me as a challenge to overcome. I've learned to spot the difference pretty quickly. The gold diggers ask about the trust structure within the first few dates. The genuine ones ask about my work, my interests, my family history, and the money comes up naturally in context rather than as an interrogation. Started seeing someone new about 2 months ago. Sarah's a pediatric nurse at MUSC, makes decent money herself, drives a sensible car, and when I mentioned the inheritance situation, her response was, "That's smart. Family money should stay protected." She's never asked about the trust details, never suggested expensive restaurants I should pay for, never made comments about what we could do with my money. It's refreshing to be valued for something other than my grandfather's financial planning. The experience taught me something important about inherited wealth. It's not just an asset, it's a responsibility. My grandfather didn't create that trust just to benefit me. He created it to protect generations of our family from exactly what Celestia tried to do. Looking back, I'm actually grateful the situation played out the way it did. Better to learn someone's true priorities 2 years in rather than 10 years in when the stakes might have been higher. And better to learn that my grandfather's planning was bulletproof in a relatively low-stress situation. Soren framed a copy of Judge Knox's ruling in his office. Perfect asset protection case study, he calls it. He's used our situation as an example for other clients who need inheritance protection. Your grandfather would be proud, he told me after everything was settled. He protected his family's wealth from a threat he never met, using laws that didn't exist when he was young. That's multi-generational thinking. He was right. My grandfather had spent his entire life building something that would last beyond his lifetime. Celestia spent 2 years planning to access it, and 30 seconds in court learning she never could. The final irony is that she actually did me a favor by demanding access to the inheritance. If she'd been patient and stayed married, she would have lived comfortably off the distributions for decades. By trying to grab everything at once, she ended up with nothing, and taught me exactly what kind of person she was. These days, I manage the trust with the same philosophy my grandfather had. Family wealth requires family protection. The money isn't mine. It belongs to the family, past and future. My job is to be a good steward of something larger than myself. Sometimes the best investment advice really is legal advice. And sometimes the most expensive lesson you can teach someone is that prepared people can't be financially manipulated. Celestia learned that being married to wealth doesn't make you wealthy. She just learned it the hard way. Edit. For anyone dealing with inherited wealth, get it properly protected before you need protection. Prenups can be challenged, but irrevocable trusts established before marriage are nearly bulletproof. Edit 2. Someone asked if I'd ever considered dissolving the trust to access the principal. Never. My grandfather created something that will protect our family for generations. I'm not going to destroy that legacy for short-term convenience.